So the other day I was watching a movie called Arrival, and it got me thinking about some things. Not the movie called The Arrival that came out in the late 90s. This movie that I'm talking about came out in, I think, 2016, and it had Forrest Whitaker in it. But, anyways, the previews make it look like it's just your average run of the mill alien movie. But the plot is actually more about different forms of communication and retrocausality more than anything else. And most of you guys in the community are already familiar with retrocausality, but for those who aren't, retrocausality is basically it's like a future event that occurs that's so powerful that it kind of acts like a wave that reverberates back into the past. So we think of time as linear, right? Following a sequence of past, present to future. Well, with retrocausality, events that happen in the future can actually impact the past and or present. An example of this would be some kind of like rapture or ascension that creates, for lack of a better term, a kind of shock wave that is so powerful that it reverberates back to the past and changes events in the past, which would also be our present. Some people even speculate that retrocausality may be playing a role in creating some of the Mandela effect changes. But anyways, one of the things the Arrival movie talked about is how the language that we're taught determines what we're capable of understanding. And I think that definitely applies to us. What if there was a kind of language that would open up our mind to divine communication with God on a deeper level? I think that kind of language or form of communication actually already exists, but it's been mostly hidden from the majority of people since the fall of man, even though, in a way, we've been hearing it all our lives whenever we turn on the radio. It's our perception or lack of perception that's causing it to be concealed from most people's awareness. And I'm pretty sure the reason many don't have ears to hear is because when mankind fell from that state of grace, we became susceptible to being conditioned to be blind and deaf to what has literally been right in front of our face the whole time. But anyways, I was watching this movie and it really got me thinking about how much language influences our ability to communicate and understand different concepts. Ultimately, I think language determines to a great extent the way we're able to think. Anyone who's Mandela affected, who doubts the power of language, need only try to explain the Mandela effect changes to anyone who's blind to the ME in order to see how hard our language makes it to explain how history can change. We always end up sounding illogical to people because of the way that our language is set up. This is a clip that kind of explains what I'm saying better.
If you can hear what I'm saying right now and understand me, you can probably speak English. It's also very likely that you think in English as well, right? For example, you might be saying to yourself, when is this guy going to get to the point? But if I took all of those words out of the English language, would you still be able to think that thought? After all, you probably think to yourself in language all of the time. If you know less words, can you think less thoughts? More importantly, can you think complex thoughts? George Orwell explores this theme in his classic novel 1984. Winston Smith, the protagonist, lives in the superstate of Oceania in the province Airstrip 1 in the city of London. The state is governed by a totalitarian party led by a figure known as Big Brother. The party seeks complete and total control over the entire state and its citizens. They use tactics typical of totalitarian governments such as constant surveillance, strict disapproval of independent thought, and controlling access to information. But I want to focus on one tactic in particular. The party has invented a new language called Newspeak, which is meant to replace Oldspeak. Oldspeak is the English we all currently use. Newspeak is a heavily modified version of English with a much smaller vocabulary. Over several decades, the party hopes to pare down the language to take out any words that don't serve their ideological mission. Borrowing a direct example from Orwell, words like warm would not exist. Instead, it would be referred to as uncold. The root word cold, however, would still exist. Plus cold would mean very cold, and double plus cold would be very, very cold. In essence, one could revolve any discussion about temperature around one word: cold. In Orwell's own words, Newspeak was designed not to extend, but to diminish the range of thought. The party believed that by limiting the language available to its citizens, they could limit their ability to think. More importantly, they believed that they could limit a person's ability to think thoughts that were in opposition to the party's ideology. Concepts like political or intellectual freedom would be non-existent. But does this hypothesis hold any weight? Could a totalitarian government actually limit our ability to think of the concept of freedom by removing the word from our collective vocabulary? According to the theory of linguistic determinism, the answer would be yes. Linguistic determinism is one half of a greater theory referred to as the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. The other half is linguistic relativity, which we may touch on in a separate video. Edward Sapir wrote that human beings do not live in the objective world alone, nor alone in the world of social activity as ordinarily understood, but are very much at the mercy of the particular language which has become the medium of expression for their society. He also wrote that the world in which different societies live are distinct worlds, not merely the same world with different labels attached. Sapir believed that language did, indeed, have an effect on our thinking. Benjamin Lee Whorf, Sapir's student, developed this line of reasoning further. He claimed that, upon studying the Hopi language, he found that they had no words that referred to time. This discovery led Whorf to believe that, because they did not have any way to refer to it, Hopi speakers experienced time differently. To quote him, he said that, in this Hopi view, time disappears and space is altered so that it is no longer the homogeneous and instantaneous timeless space of our supposed intuitions or of classical Newtonian mechanics. At the same time, new concepts and abstractions flow into the picture, taking up the task of describing the universe without reference to such time or space, abstractions for which our language lacks adequate terms. In English, our verbs contain tenses that explain the time during which an action occurred. For example, if I said that it snowed, you know that I'm referring to the past. If I say that it is snowing, then you know that it's happening in the present. In English, we divide time and split it up into past, present, future, minutes, hours, days, weeks, and experience it as such. Is it true? Do the Hopi experience time in a fundamentally different way than we do because they lack the words for dividing it? It seems that there's a complex and interdependent relationship between language, thought, and culture. What does all of this mean in the context of 1984? Would Newspeak be effective in limiting thought? In his book, The Language Instinct, psychologist, linguist, and author Steven Pinker puts forth an interesting concept. He believes that all humans have an innate language of thought or mentalese. He states that knowing a language, then, is knowing how to translate mentalese into strings of words and vice versa. According to this theory, you and I are not thinking in English. Rather, we're thinking in a language of thought and translating that into our respective languages so that we can communicate with others.
So it seems to me that a lot of our language is also based on the conditioned beliefs of the society that we live in, and the influence language has on thought and thought has on language works in like a bi-directional way. And at the end of the day, that's what language is. It's thoughts that are translated into sounds or lines of ink. It all comes down to thoughts, though, the way we think. But yeah, the reason I'm talking about language and communication is because I had an out-of-body experience about 10 years ago that changed my life, and a big part of it had to do with language. It's hard to even put into words what exactly I experienced just because of the limits of human language. Basically, it made me a believer that it's possible for a form of language or telepathic communication to happen through the medium of music, which sounds very crazy, I know. Had I not had this out-of-body experience myself, I would think it were crazy too. And I really didn't even want to go into detail about this on my channel because I know that there's a lot of closed-minded people out there, and I just didn't feel like dealing with the criticism. But I'm continuing to get these messages through the music, and I know it's because it's pushing me to talk about this. And the messages that are coming through the music aren't something that just I'm getting. There's plenty of people who are receiving this communication, but only a handful of people willing to make videos about it. And really, I think this form of communication has always been taking place. It's just that we've been asleep for a long time and we didn't have ears to hear, but that's changing now that a lot of people are starting to wake up. Um, so, yeah, I had my out of body experience about 10 years ago, and I've never experienced anything like it since. It's very hard to describe because there are actually no words in any human language that can really come close to conveying the magnitude of it. But I'll try. So, me and my friend were sitting on the couch in my living room. It was just a regular day. I had one of my prayer books on the table from earlier, and out of boredom, just kind of decided that I'd read one of the short prayer meditations out loud to my friend. It was like maybe, I want to say, 2 or 3 pages, if that. And at the time, I didn't feel like there was anything particularly special about this prayer or that it was somehow different from the other prayer meditations in that book. In fact, I really don't even remember the details of what the prayer meditation said. I just remember there was some part in the prayer that talked about a path or taking some kind of path. So I remember reading that part, and then to this day, I have no idea why I stood up, but I stopped reading in the middle of the prayer and I stood up. I don't know why I stood up, but I just stood up. The moment I stood up, I was in two places at once. The only way I can describe it to you is that I lifted out of my body, but I was still aware of my physical body, if that makes sense. I guess you can say it was my soul that lifted out of my body. I don't know how to describe it. I was standing in my living room, but simultaneously inside my mind's eye, I was inside of some kind of vortex. It was an actual place. I physically felt myself pulled out of my body like there was some kind of slow motion reverse gravity. And that wasn't even the most surprising part. What absolutely blew my mind was the feeling that I got and the sound of the music. Earlier in the day, we had put a CD in, and the song that was playing at the time was an Avant song. It wasn't even turned up that loud. I wasn't even paying attention to the Avant song in the background until this happened. When I lifted out of my body, the song got so incredibly loud. It was like my sense of hearing had heightened or something. The song on the CD turned into what sounded like it had to have been a million or at least thousands and thousands of voices all singing together in perfect harmony. It's hard to explain. It sounded like the actual singer's voice kind of faded into the background, and the instruments of the song became the singers instead. So it was like the song got turned inside out, and the artist's voice, Avant's voice, sounded like an instrument in the background, and the of the song, and then like the actual instruments in the song, including the bass, sounded like the vocals of the song, if that makes sense. And all the instruments, even the bass, was composed of these thousands of beautiful voices. I wish I could explain it better, but I can't. They were all one, but at the same time, it sounded like thousands and thousands of heavenly beautiful voices made up of male and female voices that all sang together to create this perfect harmony. The pattern of notes, or what do you call it? The notes of the harmony was something I could never even have imagined. Oh my God. And the meaning behind the sound was, oh my God, they were singing about God. They were singing about how much God loves us. And the feeling was, see, it's hard to talk about this because there are no actual words in any human language that can describe the feeling. The feeling was like, imagine a time in your life when you felt the most loved and the most cherished, and multiply it by literally a trillion, and that doesn't even come slightly close to the feeling. The word love isn't even an accurate enough word. Maybe life itself, the word life probably comes a little closer to describing the feeling, more than the word love. But I mean, these words, the feeling was so far beyond either of these words. The emotion was an actual physical sensation in my body, especially in my head and in my chest. It was like ecstasy, like pure bliss. It was kind of weird because even though I lifted out of my body, I could still feel this blissful physical sensation in my body. But the music gave me more than a feeling of love and ecstasy. It took me to an actual place. Even though my physical body was standing in my living room, inside my mind, I could see this vortex that I was inside of. The direction of the vortex, it didn't look like it stretched out in front of me. It was like, it looked like it was way above my head. It seemed like it stretched out forever. And I know I wasn't just imagining this place because I don't have the capability to imagine such a place. My soul was inside of this vortex that was, it was slightly spinning very, very slowly while I was slowly floating up through it. And I just knew that it was God that I was slowly floating up to. It was like nothing I've ever seen. It was weird. It was like everything was kind of foggy looking in this place. Or maybe foggy is not the right word. I would say it looked more translucent. It was very vast and endless looking. It stretched out as far as my mind's eye could see. And in the distance, I could see other souls that were inside of this vortex with me who were also slowly floating up to God. And I kind of got the sense that I was somehow connected to all of those souls inside the vortex. And I got the sense that there was a female next to me, but I couldn't make out what she looked like. It was like she was to my side or maybe slightly behind me. Now I say floating up to God, but I never saw God or anything like that. I didn't even see any angels, but the feeling I got, it was just a knowing. Some things you just know when it happens to you. And I knew that this vortex was some kind of place that connects souls directly to God. That's the only way I can describe this place using human language. I know this is going to sound strange, but while I was there, I experienced what I can only describe as telepathic communication. But what's odd is it wasn't even like it was a conversation. It was only 2 words. And I don't even know who gave me this message, but it was clear as day. Someone telepathically transferred the words groove theory to me. And to this day, I have no idea what that message means, but I'm assuming it means something important. But the phrase groove theory What it means, I don't know. But yeah, like I said, the moment I lifted out of my body, the song playing in the background totally changed to the point of where it was unrecognizable. I found a clip that kind of can give you an idea of what I heard, but really, this clip doesn't do my experience any justice at all. It's more of like a very crude comparison. The voices I heard seemed more like lighter and airy than the ones on this clip. And it seemed like there were thousands of voices. But I'll go ahead and play this short clip. So yeah, it took me forever to find anything that even remotely sounded like what I heard, but like I said, that clip doesn't even really come close to what I heard, but it's the best I can find. And keep in mind, the song that was playing in the background was just like your average R&B song, but the moment I lifted out of my body, that's when it changed. So while all of this was happening, I could feel my eyes, like my physical eyes, getting bigger and bigger. To me, it felt like my eyes were just relaxing when they were getting wider and wider. I found out from my friend after the fact that to him, it looked like I was standing there in a state of shock. While I was out of my body, my friend kept asking me if I was scared over and over again. At first, I couldn't answer him. I just stood there. I couldn't speak. There was literally so much love and bliss that I could not speak. And to be honest, trying to carry on a conversation with my friend while all this was going on was the last thing I felt like doing anyway. But he kept asking me over and over again, "Are you scared? Are you scared?" Eventually, I was able to focus my attention on him enough to be able to shake my head no. But it was like as soon as I started to focus on my friend and what he was saying, I started to remember what the word scared meant. While I was in that vortex, I couldn't comprehend or understand what fear even was. That concept did not even register with me. But it was like the moment I acknowledged fear, I acknowledged what fear meant by listening to my friend, I immediately started to come back down to my body. And when I started to come back into my body, the CD that was playing in the background went back to sounding normal, and the feeling of being alive with God's love started to fade away, and then it was over. I was totally back in my body. Every time I think about that experience, I wish my friend hadn't been there. I wish I had just been by myself. But yeah, it was a really life-changing experience. It's like my entire state of consciousness changed. I was still me when that happened, but it's like it's hard to explain. It's really hard to explain. I had never had any kind of experience like that before in my life, and I have never had any experience like that since. But what changed for me after that day is the meaning behind the lyrics of songs that I'd hear. After that experience, whenever I'd listen to music, sometimes the words in songs would have different definitions. Now I don't get the sound of 1,000 voices that only happened that one time, and songs still sound like they have just the one voice coming from the original artist singing it. But what I continue to hear in songs is the deeper meaning behind the words. They have their own form of language that I was never able to pick up on before I had my OBE. Now, the music language has many different ways of conveying a message. Sometimes it's through metaphors in the lyrics, sometimes it's through homophones or musical synchronicities, and other times the lyrics have a more literal meaning. But that literal meaning, it's almost like the literal meaning, it's like, it's hard to explain. Yes, it's a literal meaning, but at the same time, it's almost like it applies to God. But it's so hard to explain. But the language is there. It's just waiting for us to pick up on. But it's like the sound waves of the music's harmonies can have the ability to carry different levels of communication frequencies. And when we open up our mind and focus our awareness on God's love, we can tap into the higher layers of the sound wave frequencies and actually decipher the divine communication. We just have to open up our minds and ask God to send us a message through the music. When I was having my out-of-body experience, the heavenly voices actually matched the song's rhythm perfectly, because I think that they were somehow transmitted through the instruments in the song, even though to us in this dimension or in the state of consciousness that we're in right now, we just assume that the sound patterns that instruments create in music are nothing more than just nice sounds. But there's so much about our perception and our senses that we just don't know. Really, the same can be said about existence itself. But yeah, after my out-of-body experience, I went through periods where I could pick up on the messages of God's love in the music, and then I'd like get distracted by life for a little while, and I'd stop hearing the song messages, and that kind of happened off and on for many years. But now it seems like the song messages are coming more regularly, and the depth behind the meaning almost seems to be intensifying. And there's just so many different ways that these messages come through the song lyrics that I want to get into, but if I did that, this would be like a 3-hour video. But eventually I am going to start making videos where I break down the lyrics of songs to show the encoded messages within the songs. And if anyone has any songs they would like me to decode, please leave the title and the artist in the comment section. This video is getting to be kind of long, so I'm going to say goodbye for now. Thank you guys for listening to my story, and I hope you guys leave lots of comments with songs that you would like me to use in upcoming videos that I make. Oh, real quick, if you're planning on leaving a negative comment, I would say, don't waste your time doing that. There's really no need for that. And I know I'm going to get those people out there who say, the entire music industry is evil, so therefore every song is evil and can't be trusted. I'm not denying that there are many people in the music industry that would love to try to get rid of any trace of God in the music. But what I'm telling you is that it's not possible to get rid of God's message in the music, because his message of love is transmitted within the musical notes and harmonies themselves. The fact that they've tried to take over and corrupt the music industry is just further evidence that they know that there is something divine that can be found within the music. And to think that a group of people could somehow extinguish a message of love that is so strong is almost laughable. It doesn't matter how commercialized the production of music has become, because the encoded language within the music is still there. I'm just going by my own firsthand experience. It's not possible to get rid of the divine messages communicated through the language of music. So please save your negative comments. And again, I welcome any comments with the song, title, and artist that anyone would like me to decode in upcoming videos. So thank you for listening and have a blessed day.